33 fashion horrors. You thought modern fashion was insane. Forget everything you knew about runway experiments and shocking designers. Fashion history isn't about elegant silhouettes and exquisite fabrics. It's a parade of deadly poisons, broken bones, suffocating corsets, and shoes you can't walk in. It's thousands of women burned alive in their own dresses, millions of mutilated children's feet, men dying from poisoning by their own hats, aristocratic women whose faces turned into rotting masks from cosmetics, and all of this, voluntarily, to conform to the fashionable standards of the era. Get ready, your world is about to be turned upside down. What's presented as the graceful history of costume and museum displays is actually a catalogue of human madness. The reality of past fashion is medical reports of mass poisonings, court records of bans on dangerous clothing, archival documents tallying victims. The numbers you're about to hear are mind-boggling, facts that have been suppressed for centuries. You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt to realize what humans are capable of in the name of beauty. But most importantly, you'll understand one simple truth. Every era considered its fashion normal, reasonable, desirable. Contemporaries didn't see the absurdity. They saw elegance, status, attractiveness. Just like you don't see the madness in what you wear every day right now. Today, I'm going to break down 33 of the strangest fashion trends in human history. 33 pieces of evidence that fashion has always been ready to kill its followers. 33 examples of collective insanity that was called beauty. From poisonous dresses at European balls to platform shoes as tall as a human. From breaking children's bones to absurdly sized men's accessories. Prepare for a complete demolition of your ideas about the past. The history they fed you in glossy magazines about vintage fashion is a polished version for museum tourists. Clean, romantic, and completely fake. The reality is medical diagnoses of death by vanity, legislative bans on dangerous footwear, mass fires from steel skirts, and a 1,000-year tradition of maiming girls for tiny feet. Let's start with the deadliest, with fashion that killed faster than any disease. Fact number 1. Pause. The London ball season, 1861. 19-year-old Matilda Schurer spins in a waltz, and her dress sparkles with emerald brilliance in the light of hundreds of candles. 4 hours later, the girl will feel burning on her skin. 2 days later, she'll begin dying in terrible convulsions. A week later, doctors will write in the medical report, death from arsenic poisoning. But Matilda ate and drank nothing at the ball. She was killed by her own dress. Imagine the scale of this catastrophe. In the mid-19th century, the most fashionable color was bright emerald green, called Scheele's green or Paris green. The dye was created from arsenic trioxide, one of the most poisonous substances in nature. One dress contained up to 900 grams of pure arsenic. Less than 1 gram is enough for fatal human poisoning. When a woman danced, sweated, was in a hot hall, the arsenic absorbed through her skin. When the dress dried, the poison turned to dust and entered the lungs. Doctors of the time recorded hundreds of cases of mysterious deaths of young women after balls. The symptoms were always the same: skin ulcers, vomiting, convulsions, kidney failure, death. But fashion didn't stop. The green color was too beautiful. Factories continued producing poisonous fabrics for 30 more years after the first documented deaths, and women continued buying them, because the alternative, being out of fashion, seemed more frightening than death. Fact number 2. Pause. Queen Elizabeth I of England's face by the end of her life resembled a cracked mask. Under a layer of white lead paint, nearly a centimeter thick hid skin eaten away by ulcers and scars. The Queen died in 1603, refusing to remove her makeup even on her deathbed. Her face hadn't been seen without makeup for the last 20 years of her life. Because under the makeup, there was nothing but destroyed flesh. Venetian ceruse, that's what they called white lead paint. The perfect complexion of a 16th, 17th century aristocrat. Deathly pale skin, as if carved from marble. A tan was considered a sign of a peasant woman working in the fields. A noble lady had to look as if she'd never seen sunlight. And Cyrus created exactly that effect. The recipe was simple and deadly. White lead mixed with vinegar to a thick paste. Applied in a thick layer to the face, neck, chest. Lead slowly absorbed into the skin, entered the bloodstream, destroyed the nervous system. First signs of poisoning: hair loss, blackening teeth, ulcers appearing on the face. Then headaches began, memory loss, convulsions, madness. The finale, agonizing death from organ failure. But the most horrifying thing is different. When ulcers appeared on the face, women didn't stop using the white lead. On the contrary, they applied an even thicker layer to hide the damage. Lead corroded the skin more severely. An even thicker layer was needed, a vicious cycle that ended only with death. Medical treatises of the 17th century are full of descriptions of aristocratic women whose faces literally fell apart while they were alive. But Cyrus continued to be used for another 200 years. Fact number 3. Pause. The Italian word belladonna translates as beautiful woman. Romantic, isn't it? Now learn that this plant is one of Europe's most dangerous poisons. 3 belladonna berries kill an adult. But Italian beauties of the Renaissance era dropped the juice of this plant into their eyes. Every day, for years, pupils dilated to the size of the entire iris. Eyes became huge, shining, mesmerizing, the doll-like gaze, the dream of every 15th, 16th century aristocrat. Men considered such a gaze innocent and sensual at the same time. Poets praised the bottomless eyes of their beloveds. They didn't know these eyes were slowly going blind. Belladonna alkaloids block the function of eye muscles. The pupil stops reacting to light. At first, a woman simply squints in the sun. After months, she can no longer distinguish objects in bright light. After a year, lens clouding begins, early cataracts. Many Italian aristocratic women in their 20s and 30s were practically blind. They moved with companions who led them by the arm. But in public, they still dropped belladonna in their eyes before going out. Doctors of the time wrote directly about the connection between the fashion for dilated pupils and the epidemic of blindness among noble ladies. The church declared this practice a sin. Laws in some Italian cities prohibited the sale of belladonna to unmarried girls. Nothing helped. Fashion was stronger than common sense, religion, and law. Beauty demanded sacrifices, and women paid with their sight. Fact number 4. Pause. Mad as a hatter, an English saying from the 19th century. Lewis Carroll didn't invent the Mad Hatter out of thin air. He described reality. In Victorian England, hat makers really did go mad. Massively, publicly, irreversibly. And everyone knew why. But no one stopped production. Felt hats, top hats, bowlers, boater hats were created using mercury nitrate. The process was called carroting. Rabbit or beaver fur was soaked in a mercury solution so the hairs would felt into dense fabric. Hatters worked in closed workshops, inhaling mercury vapors 8 to 12 hours a day, without masks, without ventilation, without days off. The first symptoms appeared after 6 months of work: trembling hands, staggering gait, slurred speech. This was called hatter's tremor. After a year, personality degradation began. Outbursts of rage, paranoia, hallucinations. Many hatters died before 40 from mercury poisoning. Those who lived to 50 were complete invalids, shaking, drooling, unable to string 2 words together, with destroyed nervous systems. Medical reports recorded hundreds of cases. Newspapers wrote about the curse of the profession. Charitable societies created shelters for demented hatters. But production didn't stop. Because men's fashion demanded perfect felt hats, and no one wanted to wear a hat made from fabric without mercury treatment, it quickly lost its shape. Elegance was more important than craftsmen's lives. Mercury in felt production was banned only in 1941, a century after the first documented deaths. Fact number 5. Pause. The 1920s, the era of jazz, emancipation, and scientific progress. Women cut their hair short, smoke in public places, demand equal rights, and buy cosmetics with radium, voluntarily, with enthusiasm, for huge amounts of money. Radium was discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898. The substance glowed in the dark. Early studies showed that radiation could destroy diseased cells. Radiation therapy was born. But marketers drew an absurd conclusion. If radium cures cancer, it must rejuvenate skin. The market was flooded with face creams with radium, radioactive powder, lipstick with revitalizing radiation, soap for eternal youth. Advertising promised wrinkle smoothing, fresh complexion, freckle removal. The price of one jar, $15 with an average salary of $100 a month. Women economized on food for the sake of the miracle. After several months of use, ulcers appeared on the skin. After a year, teeth fell out. After 2 years, bone cancer developed, especially of the jaw. Radium accumulated in the body, destroying bone marrow and causing leukemia. The most famous victim, Eben Byers, who drank radioactive water for energy. He died in 1932. His body was buried in a lead coffin. It was emitting radiation. His jaw dissolved from radiation while he was alive. Radioactive cosmetics were banned in the 30s, when victims numbered in the thousands. But demand remained. Women believed in eternal youth more strongly than in death. Fact number 6. Pause. Venice, 16th century. A woman stands at the threshold of a house, holding onto the shoulders of 2 servants. She tries to take a step but can't. Her height is now 2 meters 30 centimeters. And this isn't her real height. It's the height of her shoes. Chopines, Venetian platform shoes, turned walking into a deadly dangerous activity. The tallest chopines preserved in museums reach 76 centimeters. That's the height of an 8-year-old child under an adult woman's feet. Platforms were made of wood or cork, covered with leather or velvet, decorated with pearls and precious stones. The higher the shoe, the richer and more noble the owner. Courtesans wore chopines 50 to 60 centimeters high to emphasize their status and clients' wealth. Moving in such shoes without help was impossible. Venetian ladies went out only with 2 servants who held her under the arms on both sides. One awkward step, and a fall from nearly a meter high. Broken arms, legs, skulls were commonplace. Fatal cases were regularly recorded. The Venice City Council issued decrees limiting chopin height to 8 centimeters. The decrees were completely ignored. But the most absurd thing is different. The church declared chopins sinful footwear, not because of danger to life, but because high platforms allowed women to use more expensive fabric for dresses. The skirt had to reach the ground, meaning a meter more material was needed. This was considered wastefulness and pride. Women were excommunicated from the church for wearing chopins. But fashion defeated religion. Venetian women continued walking on stilts until the end of the 17th century. Fact number 7. Pause. Poland, 14th century. A knight can't get up from his chair after a feast, not because he's drunk, but because the toes of his shoes are so long they're tied in a knot at his belt. To stand up, he needs help from a servant who will untie the knot and free his feet. This isn't comedy. This is the reality of fashion for Krakowis, shoes with absurdly long toes. Krakowis appeared in Krakow, hence the name, and quickly conquered all of Europe. Toe length was strictly regulated by law depending on social status. A commoner was allowed 15 centimeters, a merchant, 30, a knight, 45, an aristocrat, 60 and more. The toes were stuffed with moss, tow, or horsehair to hold their shape. Walking in such shoes was practically impossible. The toes caught on steps, tangled between legs, got stuck in doorways. So they were either tied with chains to the knees, or tied in a knot at the belt, or bent upward and fastened under the knee. Yes, you understood correctly. Men voluntarily wore shoes that made normal movement impossible, for the sake of status. The military encountered the problem first. Knights in Crackawees couldn't run quickly, mount horses, fight on foot. In 1365, English King Edward III issued a decree prohibiting shoes with toes longer than 15 centimeters. French King Charles V limited the length to 10 centimeters. The Pope declared Crackawees a diabolical invention and threatened excommunication. Nothing worked. The fashion lasted another 150 years. Because a long shoe toe meant you didn't work with your hands, didn't walk long distances on foot, didn't do anything practical, you were an aristocrat, and it didn't matter that you looked like a circus clown. Fact number 8. Pause. China, 10th century AD. A mother holds her 5-year-old daughter while she screams in pain. 4 toes on each foot are broken and bent under the sole. The arch of the foot is broken twice and bent inward. The girl will scream like this every day for the next 10 years, because her feet must be 10 centimeters in size. This was called lotus feet, and it was the ideal of beauty for millions of women over 1,000 years. Foot binding began at age 5 to 7, while bones were still soft. The foot was tightly bound, bending the toes under the sole and breaking the arch. Bandages were changed every 2 days, each time tightening more. Bones healed incorrectly. Toes necrotized and sometimes fell off. This was considered lucky, meaning the foot would be smaller. The ideal size, golden lotus, was 7 to 10 centimeters from heel to toe. Women with lotus feet couldn't walk normally. They moved with tiny steps, leaning on a stick or servant. Constant infections, gangrene, pain for life. But this made them desirable brides. Tiny feet meant high status. Such a woman never worked in the fields. Special silk shoes the size of a child's palm were embroidered with pearls. They were given by grooms. The practice began at the emperor's court in the 10th century and spread to all social classes. By the 19th century, about 2 billion women in China had mutilated feet. Binding was banned only in 1911. But the tradition continued illegally in villages until the 50s of the 20th century. The last women with lotus feet died in the 2000s, a millennium of collective child mutilation in the name of beauty. Fact number 9. Pause. England, 1585. A court lady has been standing motionless for 3 hours at a royal reception, not because etiquette requires it, but because she physically cannot turn her head. On her shoulders is a starched collar 80 centimeters in diameter, resembling a giant plate or millstone. This construction weighs 5 kilograms. Keeping her head straight is the only way not to break her neck. Tudor ruffs reached the peak of absurdity under Queen Elizabeth I. The wider the collar, the higher the status. For ordinary townspeople, 15 to 20 centimeters. For merchants, 30. For aristocracy, 50 to 80. The record collar had a radius of almost a meter. The head was located in the center of a snow-white circle 2 meters in diameter. Manufacturing took days. The finest linen was folded into hundreds of small pleats, starched with a wheat flour mixture, then set on a wire frame using heated tongs. One wrong move, and the entire construction collapsed. The collar was put on last, with the help of 2 maids. It was attached to the dress or doublet with special pins. Eating was impossible. You couldn't lower your head. They invented special spoons with handles 30 to 40 centimeters long to bring food to the mouth through the collar. You could only sleep sitting up or with a special wooden support under the neck. Many aristocratic women hired maids whose sole task was to support the mistress's head during sleep. The church called ruffs devil's wheels. Doctors warned of cervical vertebrae deformation. Several people suffocated when a starched collar got wet in the rain and sagged, blocking the airways. The fashion ended only with Elizabeth's death in 1603. Her successor James V banned ruffs by royal decree. Finally, courtiers could turn their heads. Fact number 10. Pause. Paris, 1863. A ballroom is engulfed in flames. Women can't run out. Their skirts get stuck in doorways. The crinoline width is 3 meters, and the doorway is 80 centimeters. They try to turn around, push each other, fall. The steel hoops of the skirts catch on each other. Fire spreads instantly. The fabrics are soaked with highly flammable starch. In 10 minutes, 16 women will die. This wasn't the first and not the last crinoline tragedy. The crinoline, a skirt on a steel frame of hoops, became fashionable in the 50s of the 19th century. The diameter increased with each season. They started with 1 meter. 5 years later, they wore 2 meters. By the 60s, fashionable women walked in skirts 3 to 3.5 meters in diameter. That's the width of a small room. The steel frame weighed 4 to 6 kilograms, plus meters of fabric on top. Crinolines killed regularly and in various ways. Women fell downstairs because they couldn't see the steps under their skirts. They were hit by horse-drawn carriages. Because of the skirt width, it was impossible to step aside quickly. Gusts of wind flipped women over like sailing ships, but the most terrible were fires. Statistics from England for the period from 1850 to 1870. More than 3,000 women burned alive when their crinolines caught fire from fireplaces, candles, kitchen stoves. Newspapers ran special sections on deaths from crinolines. Doctors begged for a ban on the fashion. Fire departments issued instructions on how to save women from burning crinolines. You had to cut the steel with special scissors. The church declared crinolines a sin. Nothing helped. The fashion ended only in the 70s when the silhouette changed to the bustle. Not because of deaths, simply because the ideal figure changed. Fact number 11. Pause. Paris, 1910. A woman falls on the pavement. She didn't trip, she simply couldn't take a normal step. Her skirt is so narrow that her legs are bound like a prisoner's. Maximum step length, 15 centimeters. This is the hobble skirt, the latest fashion from Paul Poiret. The name translates as skirt for the lame, or more precisely, shackle skirt. After decades of giant crinolines, fashion sharply changed to the opposite. Now fashionable was a skirt so narrow that a woman literally couldn't walk. At the narrowest point, at knee level, the skirt circumference was 30 to 40 centimeters. For comparison, to take a normal step, you need a minimum of 50 to 60 centimeters of freedom. Women moved with tiny steps, mincing like bound prisoners. Climbing stairs was practically impossible. Getting into a tram or automobile was a separate acrobatic feat. Many fell on level ground and broke legs, arms, noses. Doctors recorded an epidemic of fractures and sprains among fashionable women. But the real madness started later. Skirt manufacturers began sewing special shackles into the hem, straps or chains that additionally constricted the fabric at ankle level. A woman could only walk with steps of 10 to 15 centimeters. In some cities, rules appeared prohibiting hobble skirts on public transport. Women in them created crushes, unable to exit in time. The fashion lasted until the beginning of World War I. It didn't end because of absurdity, but because women went to work in factories instead of men who went to the front. And it turned out, in a SK shackles the legs, it's impossible to work. Practicality defeated fashion for the first time in history, but only because war began. Fact number 12. Pause. London, 1892. Surgeon Robert Dickey publishes a medical report after the autopsy of a 23-year-old aristocrat. Cause of death: liver perforation by a broken rib. The girl had 11 broken ribs, deformed lungs, displaced stomach, and a liver compressed to half normal size. She hadn't been in an accident. She had simply worn a corset all her life. Waist measurement during life, 38 centimeters. Normal for an adult woman, 65 to 70. The Victorian ideal of the female figure, wasp waist. The thinner, the more beautiful. Girls began being laced into corsets from age 10 to 12, while ribs were still growing. By 20, the rib cage was irreversibly deformed. Ribs compressed inward, bones thinned and broke from constant pressure. Internal organs shifted up and down, wherever they could escape from the steel whalebone of the corset. Maids tightened the corset. The woman held onto the bedpost. The servant put her foot in her back and pulled the lacing with all her might. The process took 20 to 30 minutes. After tightening, the woman couldn't breathe deeply. Lung capacity decreased by 30 to 40%. Hence the famous Victorian fainting spells. This wasn't the delicacy of young ladies, but banal brain hypoxia from lack of oxygen. Medical statistics of the 19th century show 80% of aristocratic women had rib deformation. 50% had chronic digestive diseases. 20% underwent surgical removal of lower ribs so the waist would be even thinner. Yes, you understood correctly. Operations to amputate healthy ribs for fashion were performed from the mid-19th century. Corsets went out of fashion only in the 20s of the 20th century. Not because women saw the light, but because the new ideal became different, the thin, androgynous figure of the boy-girl. The organs were saved not by logic, they were saved by a change in fashion standards. Fact number 13. Pause. London, 1863. In this 1 year alone, 319 deaths of women from crinoline fires were officially registered in England. Not over a decade. In 1 year, 319 women burned alive in their own dresses. And these are only documented cases in one country. Real figures for all of Europe are estimated in the thousands. The mechanics of tragedy were simple and horrible. A woman in a crinoline approached a fireplace to warm up. The steel hoops of the skirt, 2 to 3 meters in diameter, didn't let her feel how close the hem was to the fire. The fabric ignited instantly. The crinoline created a chimney effect. Air circulated inside the steel frame, fanning the flames. In seconds, the woman found herself inside a bell of fire. Attempts to help often led to new victims. A husband rushed to save his wife, caught fire himself from her dress. Children clung to their mother, burned with her. Maids tried to tear off the burning skirt. Their hands charred, and the steel hoops wouldn't yield. Only firefighters had special scissors for cutting metal, but by the time they arrived, the victim was already dead. The Times newspaper kept a chronicle of crinoline deaths. Every week, new names. Emma Murray, 37, burned at the fireplace. Margaret Davy, 14, caught fire from a candle. Lady Florence Paget barely escaped when a servant threw a carpet over her. Doctors begged Parliament to ban crinolines as dangerous weapons. Parliament refused. Fashion was considered personal choice, a choice that killed several thousand women over 20 years. Fact number 14. Pause. New York, 1897. Businessman John Stokes dies in his own office under mysterious circumstances. His secretary finds him blue-faced on the floor, wheezing and clutching his throat. Doctors pronounce death by suffocation, but there are no signs of violence on the neck, no water or foreign bodies in the lungs. The killer, his own collar. The Edwardian collar, starched to the hardness of cardboard, 7 centimeters high, compressed the carotid artery. Men's fashion at the turn of the 19th, 20th centuries demanded collars 5 to 9 centimeters high. The higher, the more respectable. They were starched to a state where fabric turned into a rigid plate. The collar literally held the chin forcibly raised. You couldn't lower your head. This was considered a sign of noble posture. Collars bore names according to height. Parricide, 7 centimeters. Gentleman's noose, 9. The names spoke for themselves. Men regularly lost consciousness from compressed carotid arteries, especially in heat or during physical exertion. 23 deaths from collar suffocation were documented in the US alone for the period from 1890 to 1905. The most famous case, the death of Detroit Mayor Hugh Dufferty in 1902. He was giving a speech at a factory opening, got excited, turned red, clutched his throat, and fell dead. The autopsy showed the collar compressed the artery. The brain was without blood supply for a critical 4 minutes. Newspapers called it death by fashion. The fashion for high collars ended only after World War I, when returning soldiers refused to wear anything resembling a noose. Fact number 15. Pause. London, 1761. Countess Maria Coventry dies at age 27. The court physician records in his medical journal a diagnosis that doesn't officially exist: death from vanity. The deceased's face is one continuous festering wound. Skin peels off in layers. The skull is visible in several places. She poisoned herself with lead white paint, which she used daily for 12 years. Maria Coventry was a recognized beauty of London. When at 20 she first appeared at a ball, artists begged her to pose. Poets dedicated verses to her alabaster skin. King George III called her the most beautiful face in the kingdom. And this face she decided to preserve at any cost. Every morning the procedure took 2 hours. Servants applied a thick layer of Venetian ceruse, lead white paint. On top, rouge based on cinnabar containing mercury. Eyebrows and eyelashes were lined with antimony mixed with arsenic. By 25, Maria's hair began falling out. Teeth blackened and crumbled. Ulcers appeared on her cheeks. She applied an even thicker layer of white paint to hide the destruction. Doctors begged her to stop. Her husband threatened divorce if she didn't stop wearing makeup. Maria refused. The last 2 years of her life, she practically didn't leave home. Under a layer of makeup 2 centimeters thick hid a decomposing face. When she died, maids refused to wash the body. They were afraid of catching something from the rotting flesh. She was buried in a closed coffin, though this wasn't customary for aristocracy. The most beautiful face in the kingdom couldn't be shown even dead. Fact number 16. Pause. Victorian England, 1850s. A wave of mysterious deaths of entire families sweeps the country. Symptoms are always the same: headaches, nausea, hair loss, skin ulcers, convulsions, death. Doctors are puzzled. This isn't cholera, typhus, or plague. The epidemic strikes selectively, mainly wealthy homes. The answer comes in 1862. People are being killed by their own wallpaper. The fashionable wallpaper color, emerald green, that same Shields green, arsenic dye. 1 square meter of wallpaper contained up to 100 grams of arsenic trioxide. The average Victorian home living room, 25 to 30 square meters of walls. Simple arithmetic. 2 to 3 kilograms of pure poison surrounded the family constantly. It formulates in the body, and the dose becomes lethal after several months of residence. The scandal was huge. Manufacturers denied everything. But independent examination confirmed. In 80% of homes where mysterious deaths occurred, there was green wallpaper. Arsenic wallpaper was banned in England in 1875. But in other countries it was sold for another 20 years. One possible victim, Napoleon Bonaparte. His room on the island of St. Helena was papered with green wallpaper. Analysis of hair taken after death showed arsenic concentration 100 times above normal. Fact number 17. Pause. New York, spring of 1894. On Fifth Avenue, ladies walk with live chameleons on chains attached to corsages. The reptiles change color depending on the dress fabric. This is considered the height of wit and elegance. By the end of summer, newspapers report, in 4 months, more than 10,000 chameleons were imported and sold in the city. 6 months later, most are dead, but not from natural causes. Tropical reptiles were brought in stuffy shipholds. Half died en route. Survivors were sold in jewelry stores as living brooches. A thin gold chain 10 to 15 centimeters long was attached to the tail, the other end pinned to the dress. The chameleon crawled on the corsage, shoulders, sleeves, changing color. Animals died from stress within days. They received no food, water, or proper temperature. Many fell from dresses and were trampled in crowds. Some bit their owners, though the bite isn't venomous, it's painful. Ladies threw frightened reptiles onto the pavement. By fall of 1894, New York streets were littered with corpses of dried chameleons. the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals began a campaign against living jewelry. Newspapers wrote angry articles. In 1895, New York passed a law prohibiting wearing live animals as accessories. The fashion ended, but not from compassion for animals, but because the fine was $50, the price of a good evening dress. Humanity gained force only when backed by financial sanctions. Fact number 18. Pause. Venice, late 16th century. The city council passes another decree limiting Chopin height to 8 centimeters. This is already the 5th such decree in 30 years. The reason isn't moral. Doctors presented the council with statistics. Over the last 10 years, 230 cases of severe fractures in women wearing Chopins were registered, 17 fatal cases from falls, and an epidemic of foot deformities in girls. Chopins maimed not only from falls. Constant wearing of shoes on a 30 to 50 centimeter platform caused irreversible changes in feet and spine. The center of gravity shifted so much that leg and back muscles were in constant tension. After several years, chronic deformation developed, spinal curvature, Achilles tendon shortening, ankle arthritis. Many women who wore Chopins for 5 to 10 years could no longer walk in regular shoes. The foot became so accustomed to the extended position that attempting to stand on a flat sole caused unbearable pain. They became physically dependent on the high platform, not just fashionably. Venetian surgeons described cases where they had to surgically lengthen the Achilles tendon of women wanting to return to normal shoes. City decrees were completely ignored. Fines didn't work. Aristocratic women paid and continued wearing prohibited footwear. Church sermons had no effect. Even the threat of excommunication didn't stop them. Chopins disappeared from fashion only at the end of the 17th century, when the French court of Louis XIV introduced a new standard of elegance: shoes with moderate heels. Fashion defeated medicine, religion, and law, and retreated only before new fashion. Fact number 19. Pause. Tower of London, 1541. On the portrait of King Henry VIII by Hans Holbein, an element of wardrobe is clearly visible that the modern viewer takes for an artist's error or a feature of armor. This isn't an error. This is a codpiece, a decorative pocket on men's pants in the groin area, which during the Renaissance reached sizes bordering on absurdity. The codpiece appeared as a practical detail in the 15th century when men's hose became very tight-fitting. At first, it was just a triangular piece of fabric with lacing. But fashion turned functionality into a symbol of masculinity. By the mid-16th century, codpieces were stuffed with cotton, tow, horsehair to the size of melons. They were decorated with embroidery, precious stones, ribbons, pearls. The most extravagant codpieces protruded forward 20 to 30 centimeters. They were made in contrasting colors to attract attention. King Henry II of France wore a codpiece studded with rubies worth a small city's annual budget. Aristocrats used codpieces as pockets, hiding coins, letters, perfume vials, even small weapons there. The church called codpieces diabolical indecency and demanded a ban. Preachers denounced from pulpits sinful flaunting of flesh. But fashion didn't yield. Codpieces were worn until the end of the 16th century, when they were replaced by voluminous Rhinegrave breeches. They didn't disappear because of morality. Simply the next fashion offered men another way to demonstrate status, through hip volume, not groin. Vanity remained. Only the anatomical zone for demonstration changed. Fact number 20. Pause. London, 1770s. A young man appears on the street, and the crowd stops to look. On his head, a wig almost a meter high, curled and powdered. A pink satin coat, breeches the color of egg yolk, stockings in green stripes, shoes with buckles the size of plates. In his hand, a cane with a knob in the shape of a parrot, face whitened and rouged grotesquely. This isn't an actor or a madman. This is a macaroni. a representative of the most eccentric subculture of dandies in history. Macaronis appeared as mockery of young aristocrats returned from the grand tour of Italy. They brought back Italian fashion, Italian manners, and love of macaroni, an exotic dish for the English of the time. But instead of being offended, the dandies appropriated this nickname and turned it into a challenge to all society. Their wigs reached heights of 90 centimeters and required special high doorways. Wigs were decorated with feathers, ribbons, toy ships, wax fruit. Makeup was brighter than women's: white lead, rouge, beauty patches of black velvet on the face. Clothing combined incompatible colors deliberately provocatively. Buttons on coats were the size of a child's fist. Newspapers ridiculed macaronis. Caricaturists drew them as beings of indeterminate sex. The church denounced the sodomite sin of effeminacy. But the subculture flourished for 20 years. Macaronis proved fashion can be not only about beauty or status. It can be a weapon against tradition, provocation, mockery of propriety. They disappeared only with the beginning of the French Revolution, when extravagance became deadly dangerous. The guillotine sobered faster than sermons. Fact number 21. Pause. A family photograph from the 1880s. Mother in a black dress, father with a beard and frock coat, 3 daughters in white dresses with lace, and another child in the same dress with long curls. The modern viewer will decide this is a 4th daughter. Actually, this is a son who is 6 years old. And this is completely normal for the Victorian era. From birth to age 6 or 7, all children, regardless of sex, wore identical dresses, white or light-colored, with lace, ruffles, often indistinguishable from girls. Hair for both boys and girls was grown long, curled into ringlets. Distinguishing a child's sex in photographs of the time is practically impossible. The reasons were partly practical. Dresses are easier to wash, no need to sew a separate wardrobe, more convenient to change diapers for infants, but mainly philosophical justification. Victorians believed that until age 7, a child didn't yet have a formed nature. A boy became a man only through a special ritual, first haircut and first pants. Until that moment, he remained in sexless childhood. The ritual of breeching was an important family event. They held a small celebration, invited relatives. The boy was ceremoniously given a short haircut and dressed in his first men's suit. From that day, he moved from the nursery under mother and nanny's supervision to the men's part of the house under father and teacher's watch. The tradition faded in the early 20th century. Not because of changing views on gender, but because children's fashion became a mass industry and it was more profitable for manufacturers to create gender-separated assortments from birth. Commerce changed a tradition that ideology couldn't change. Fact number 22. Pause. Kyoto, 18th century. A woman is preparing for a ceremony. Maids help her put on a kimono worth 5,000 yen, a craftsman's annual income. They arrange her hair in a complex hairstyle with precious pins, whiten her face with rice powder, and the final touch before going out, the woman dips a brush in black lacquer and carefully paints her teeth. All her teeth, to absolute blackness. This is ohaguro, tooth blackening, a symbol of beauty, status, and marriage for centuries in Japan and Southeast Asia. The blackening composition was disgusting. Iron filings soaked in vinegar or tea until forming a black liquid. Plant tannins were added. The mixture smelled like rotting metal. The taste was so terrible that many women vomited at first application. The procedure was repeated every 3 to 5 days because the blackness wore off from eating. The logic of tradition: white teeth belong to peasants and children. Black teeth, a sign of a married woman of high status. In some regions, they also blackened men aristocrats' teeth to emphasize noble origin. The contrast between whitened face and black teeth was considered the height of elegance. A married lady's smile should reveal a black abyss of mouth. Medical consequences were predictable: enamel destruction, cavities, gum infections, tooth loss by 40. The mixture of iron and acid literally dissolved teeth from within. But this was considered an acceptable price for conforming to the beauty standard. The tradition was banned in Japan in 1870 as part of Meiji Restoration modernization. An imperial decree declared ohaguro a barbaric custom incompatible with civilized society. Not medical arguments won, but the government's desire to look European in Western eyes. Beauty submitted to geopolitics. Fact number 23. Pause. Florence, 1530. A tailor takes measurements from an aristocrat for a new doublet. The client's chest circumference, 135 centimeters. Waist circumference, 110. Hips, 145. The client looks like a huge barrel on thin legs. And this isn't the result of obesity. This is the result of bombasting, padding clothing to incredible sizes, turning the human body into geometric abstraction. Renaissance men's fashion demanded a massive, powerful silhouette. Broad shoulders symbolized strength, protruding chest, nobility, voluminous hips, wealth sufficient not to engage in physical labor. Since nature didn't endow everyone with such proportions, fashion was created artificially. Doublets and jackets were stuffed with horsehair, wool, tow, sawdust, even bran. The weight of such a doublet reached 8 to 10 kilograms. Pants were stuffed so much that a man couldn't sit in a narrow chair. Hips didn't fit. Some aristocrats hired servants whose sole task was to carry a folding chair of the needed width behind the master. In summer, padding turned into torture. Inside the doublet, temperature rose to unbearable levels. Sweat soaked the padding, which began to rot and emit odor. Insects bred, moths, mites, fleas. Aristocrats doused themselves with perfume to drown out the stench from their own clothing. But the most absurd, padding was so voluminous that men couldn't independently scratch themselves, pick something up from the floor, hug someone. They became helpless as infants, completely dependent on servants. And this was precisely the goal. Helplessness proved, you're so rich, you don't need to do anything independently, not even move normally. Fact number 24. Pause. France, 12th century. At a royal feast, guests can't independently bring food to their mouths, not because they're bound or sick, but because their sleeves are longer than their arms, much longer. The sleeves of the bliaut dress hang to the floor and beyond, dragging on stone slabs 2 to 3 meters behind the owner. The bliaut, a Romanesque period dress with sleeves of incredible length, became a symbol of absolute idleness. The logic is simple to the point of cynicism. If you have meter-long sleeves, you can't do anything with your hands. Nothing. You can't pick up an object, open a door, eat without help, even wipe your face. Therefore, you're of such high status that servants do everything for you. During meals, sleeves had to be thrown over shoulders or held by special servants. When walking, lifted above the ground, otherwise they collected all dirt and dust. Any action required help. Church chronicles preserved indignant records. Ladies at the royal court are unable to make the sign of the cross without outside help because of sleeve length. The church declared the bliaut sinful wastefulness. Sleeves used 3 to 4 times more expensive fabric than the rest of the dress. Abbot Bernard of Clairvaux, in a sermon of 1128, angrily wrote, "Sleeves sweep filth from floors, collect drunkards' vomit and dogs' urine." The Paris bishop threatened excommunication for women with sleeves longer than the elbow. Nothing helped. The bliaut was worn until the end of the 12th century, until the Crusades changed fashion toward practicality. For the first time in history, an external factor, war, proved stronger than the desire to demonstrate idleness through absurd clothing. Fact number 25. Pause. Ancient Egypt, New Kingdom, approximately 1450 BC. On a fresco from a nobleman's tomb, feast guests are depicted. Above each head, a strange conical object resembling a hat. Archaeologists long debated what this was: headdresses, religious symbols, artists' errors. The answer turned out to be simultaneously elegant and disgusting. These are perfume cones made of animal fats soaked with aromatic oils. They were placed on the head before a feast and slowly melted in the heat, dripping down hair, face, clothing for hours. Cones were made from beef or goose fat, mixed with myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, lotus oil. One cone weighed about 500 grams. Height, 20 to 30 centimeters. At a ceremonial feast, temperature rose to 35 to 40 degrees. From many people, oil lamps, braziers. The cone began melting almost immediately. Fat dripped down the face, dropped on shoulders, soaked the wig or hair, left greasy marks on snow-white linen garments. By the end of the feast, a person was covered with an oily film from head to waist. This was considered a sign of a successful evening. The more the cone melted, the longer and merrier the celebration. A dried, untouched cone meant the feast was short and boring. Egyptian logic. Incense repels evil spirits and attracts gods. Constant envelopment in a fragrant cloud creates protection and blessing. Plus, fat moisturized skin in Egypt's dry climate. Practical, religious, and status-worthy simultaneously. Only to modern people does it seem disgusting to sit for hours under a melting fat cap. Fact number 26. Pause. Versailles, 1780. A court lady enters a doorway sideways, not because of a wide skirt, but because her hairstyle doesn't fit the height. On her head, a construction of her own and others' hair, wire frame, cushions, horsehair, flour, lard, and powder 90 centimeters high. All this is crowned with a miniature ship with sails. Such hairstyles weren't removed for weeks, sometimes months. The fashion for monstrous hairstyles began at Marie Antoinette's court. The Queen demanded ever higher and more complex constructions. Hairdressers competed in inventiveness. On heads, they created entire scenes. Gardens with flowers, hunting subjects, battle compositions, ships at sea. The record, the Duchesse de Chartres' hairstyle 120 centimeters high with a mechanical mill whose blades rotated. Creation took 8 to 10 hours. First, own hair was teased onto a wire frame. Cushions stuffed with horsehair were added for volume. Others' hair and hairpieces were woven in. Everything was abundantly smeared with lard or pomade to hold, then thickly powdered with flour or starch. Decorations were attached on top: feathers, ribbons, jewels, figurines. The construction wasn't dismantled for weeks, too long to restore. They slept on special wooden stands so as not to flatten the hairstyle. Lice, fleas, sometimes mice bred inside, attracted by lard and flour. Ladies carried special long ivory needles to scratch the scalp through the construction without destroying it. The smell was monstrous. Lard went rancid, flour soured, insects died inside. Aristocratic women doused themselves with perfume, but it didn't help. Hairstyles collapsed as fashion after the French Revolution. Marie Antoinette mounted the scaffold with a simple haircut. The guillotine equalized everyone. But until then, hairstyles were yet another way to show, I live in a world where hygiene isn't more important than status. Fact number 27. Pause. Europe, 17th century. On a portrait of a noble lady, an elegant pendant on a chain at the waist is visible. Gold, filigree, tiny holes in the ornament. The modern viewer will take it for a locket or perfume vial. Actually, this is a flea trap. A trap for parasites that aristocratic women wore as a mandatory accessory. Because fleas, lice, and bedbugs were an inevitable part of life even at royal courts. Personal hygiene in Europe of the 16th, 18th centuries was catastrophic. They bathed rarely. It was believed water opened pores to diseases. Clothes weren't washed for months, too expensive and damages fabric. Underwear was changed once a week at best. Result: total parasite infestation of all social classes. Flea traps were made of precious metals in the form of cylinders, boxes, eggs 3 to 5 centimeters long. Bait was placed inside: drops of blood, honey, piece of lard. The body had tiny holes through which a flea could enter but not exit. Traps were worn on chains at the waist, neck, attached to corsages. Several times a day they checked, shook out caught insects, renewed bait. This was so commonplace that flea traps were given as jewelry. Examples of Fabergé's work in gold with enamel and diamonds, worth a nobleman's annual income, survive. They made children's flea traps in the form of toys, men's, strict cylinders, women's, elegant caskets. King Louis XIV had a special servant flea catcher whose sole duty was to hunt parasites on the royal body. At court, it was considered normal to interrupt conversation to catch a flea on oneself or one's interlocutor. Flea traps disappeared only in the 19th century with improved hygiene. But until then, parasites were such a norm that an entire industry of luxury accessories was created to combat them. Fact number 28. Pause. Versailles, 1705. The Duchess de Montpensier appears at a royal reception with a black velvet beauty mark the size of a coin on her left cheek. This isn't a mole or tumor. This is a mouche, an artificial beauty mark made of velvet, silk, or leather, glued with special adhesive. And its placement isn't random. This is an encoded message that everyone at court could read. Mouche were a complex language of aristocratic non-verbal communication in the 17th-18th centuries. A mole by the right eye meant passionate, by the left, coquettish, on the upper lip, ready for kisses, on the chin, married and faithful, on the forehead, majestic, on the right cheek, married, on the left, engaged, at the corner of the mouth, flirting, on the nose, bold. But this was also a political code. A mouche on the right meant belonging to the Whig Party, on the left, to the Tories. During political crises, ladies changed mouches several times a day, demonstrating shifting alliances. A mouche in the shape of a carriage meant support for royal power. In the shape of a tree, Republican views. Ladies carried entire collections of mouches in special boxes. Mouche boxes, for 40 to 50 different beauty marks, survive. Round, stars, crescents, hearts, carriages, birds. They changed them depending on situation, like modern people change social media masks. The logic was utilitarian. Mouches hid smallpox scars, syphilis scars, ulcers from lead-white paint. But they turned into language. Entire love affairs and political intrigues were played out through moving tiny pieces of velvet across the face. The tradition disappeared in the early 19th century, with the fashion for naturalness of the Empire era. But for 150 years, an aristocratic woman's face was text that needed to be able to be read. Fact number 29. Pause. Ancient Rome, 1st century AD. Senator Lucius appears in the forum, and citizens step back, covering their noses. The senator smells like a corpse, but he's not sick. He simply follows fashion. His toga is whitened with chalk and urine. His hair is styled with bear fat. His face is covered with a mixture of lead-white paint and crocodile dung. And for that final touch of elegance, he chews laurel leaves to mask the smell of his rotting teeth, destroyed by a lead sugar sweetener. Romans created cosmetics and hygiene products from what modern people would call toxic waste. The most popular face whitening agent, cerussa, white lead paint. It was mixed with crocodile or bird dung. Supposedly this nourished the skin. Hair was lightened with a mixture of ash and quicklime. This destroyed hair at the roots, but first it gave the desired golden color. Togas had to be snow white, a symbol of citizenship and status. They were bleached with fermented urine. Fullers, toga cleaners, collected urine in public urinals, fermented it for weeks, then soaked fabric in this liquid. Ammonia from decomposed urine bleached fabric. The smell was monstrous, but it was considered normal. The poet Martial wrote, "Your toga is whiter than snow, Posthumius, but it smells like you died a week ago." Teeth were cleaned with powders based on crushed pumice and urine. As a sweetener, they used sugar of lead acetate, which has a sweet taste. Chronic lead poisoning was so widespread among Roman aristocracy that some historians consider it one of the factors in the empire's fall. The ruling class was literally going mad from poisoning. Fact number 30. Pause. Paris, 1947. Christian Dior presents his new look collection. Models float down the runway in skirts requiring 40 to 50 meters of fabric. After 12 years of wartime rationing, when dresses were sewn from parachutes and women drew stocking seams on their legs with pencil because there was no nylon, this is a slap in the face to reality. And women lined up to buy it. The war had just ended. Europe lay in ruins. Fabric was rationed in many countries. Average women had clothing coupons for one dress per year. And Dior offered skirts that used more fabric than an entire family's annual allotment. Critics were outraged. Feminists called it a crime against women who had just earned independence in factories. In several countries, women in New Look were attacked on the street. Their long skirts were cut with scissors, but fashion won. Because after years of masculine overalls, military austerity, and practical functionality, women wanted to be women again, according to the old understanding. Narrow waist, full skirt, high heels, overt femininity. It didn't matter that this was impractical. It didn't matter that it was expensive. It mattered that it was the opposite of wartime fashion. Dior proved, fashion doesn't depend on logic, economy, or even public outrage. Fashion is what people want to be at a given moment. And after the war, they wanted to forget about practicality, even if it meant returning to constricting silhouettes and wasting fabric. The pendulum swung back, from masculinity to hyperfemininity, from practicality to wastefulness, from equality to emphasized gender difference. Fact number 31. Pause. Beijing, 1950. The communist government issues a decree banning foot binding once and for all. Propaganda posters show liberated women burning their tiny embroidered shoes. Inspection teams travel through villages, forcibly unbinding girls' feet. Sounds like a humanitarian triumph, right? But for millions of women, this liberation became a new torture. Women whose feet were bound in childhood and who were now 30, 40, 50 years old couldn't walk normally after unbinding. Their feet had healed in a deformed position decades ago. Bones had fused incorrectly. Muscles had atrophied. When the bandages were removed, women experienced hellish pain. The foot tried to return to its natural state, but the bones and tendons were dead. Many women who underwent forced unbinding became complete invalids. They couldn't walk without crutches. They couldn't work, and in communist China, inability to work meant starvation. The tiny shoes they had worn all their lives no longer fit. The slightly straightened foot became wider. But normal shoes caused unbearable pain because the foot structure was irreversibly damaged. Some women rebound their feet in secret despite the ban and threat of punishment. Not because of fashion, but because the deformed foot hurt less when tightly bound than when free. The propaganda promised liberation. Reality gave millions of disabled women who had lost both their old way of life and couldn't adapt to the new one. This is the dark side of progressive reforms. When tradition is abolished by force, victims of that tradition don't automatically become free. They become people between two worlds, the old one destroyed, the new one inaccessible. True liberation requires not bans, but changing the consciousness that created the tradition, and that takes generations. Fact number 32. Pause. New York, 2010. Fashion Week. A model falls on the runway for the third time this season. 12-centimeter heels, no platform, a walk that must be confident and fast. The statistics are merciless. 75% of American women have permanent foot deformities from wearing heels. Bunions, hammer toes, shortened Achilles tendons, chronic back pain, knee arthritis. The American Podiatric Medical Association publishes research. Constant wearing of heels causes the same foot and spine deformities as Victorian corsets caused to the ribcage. After 5 years of regularly wearing heels above 7 centimeters, irreversible changes occur in the musculoskeletal system. The foot can no longer stand flat, the Achilles tendon shortens, the calf muscles atrophy, the spinal curve changes, but sales of high-heeled shoes grow every year because heels make legs longer, make the silhouette slimmer, are sexy and feminine. The same arguments that justified crinolines, corsets, and chopins. The same logic. Beauty is worth suffering. Status is worth health. Conforming to the ideal is worth physical destruction. Modern women consider themselves free from barbaric fashions of the past. They laugh at Victorian corsets and Chinese foot binding, and then they put on shoes in which they can't run, can't walk long distances, can't stand for more than an hour without pain. They get Botox injections, a paralytic poison. They undergo plastic surgery, voluntary mutilation for the sake of beauty standards. They diet to exhaustion. Modern corsets that constrict not the body, but metabolism. The methods change. The essence remains. Fashion still demands sacrifice, and people still willingly pay. Because the fear of being not beautiful enough, not fashionable enough, not worthy enough, is stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. This was true 1,000 years ago. This is true now, and this will likely be true in the future. Fact number 33. Pause. 2024. You're reading this text. Perhaps in jeans that constrict your legs, a bra that compresses your chest, tight shoes, clothes with synthetic fabrics that don't let your skin breathe. Or in something comfortable, but chosen based on whether it makes you look fat, whether it's in fashion this season, whether it suits your age. You think you're free from crazy fashions of the past, that you dress for yourself, that your choices are rational and conscious. But answer honestly, how many times have you bought something uncomfortable, impractical, even painful, but beautiful? How many times have you worn something that hurt, cut, squeezed, but looked good? How many times have you rejected comfortable clothes because they were not fashionable or didn't suit you? Every era considers its fashion normal. Contemporaries don't see absurdity. A Victorian lady in a corset didn't feel like a victim. She felt elegant. A Chinese woman with lotus feet didn't consider herself mutilated. She considered herself desirable. A Renaissance man in a padded doublet didn't think he looked ridiculous. He looked powerful. Just as you don't think what you wear today is strange. But someone 100 years from now will look at photos of our time and be horrified. At high heels that cripple feet. At tight jeans that impair circulation. At plastic surgery that turns faces into masks. At diets that destroy metabolism. At the cult of youth that turns aging into a disease. At beauty standards that demand changing your natural body. Fashion is always a mirror of society's madness. It shows what people are willing to sacrifice for acceptance, status, the illusion of control over their appearance. And every era sacrifices something. The Middle Ages, health for status symbols. The Victorian era, the ability to breathe for a thin waist. The 20th century, individuality for conformity to standards. The 21st, mental health for the ideal image on social media. You can't escape fashion. Even rejection of fashion is fashion, just a different one. But you can realize one simple thing. Beauty that demands destroying your body is not beauty. It's violence packaged in pretty wrapping. Status that demands suffering is not status. It's a cage you entered voluntarily. And an ideal that's unattainable without harm to yourself is not an ideal. It's a trap. 33 facts you've just learned are not a history of fashion. This is a history of collective hypnosis that continues to this day. A history of how people in pursuit of an external image forget they have a body that must live in reality, not on a podium. A history of how fashion kills, and we pretend not to notice. The main question is not, how could they do that to themselves? The main question is, what are we doing to ourselves right now that will horrify our descendants? And do we have the courage to stop before it's too late?